So what you can do with it is that, say in case you want to load data from some source into some destination, and then all you have to do is just like write a few lines of code in Python to specify what source you want to load the destination from, the data from, what destination you want to load to, and DLT will do the rest. By rest, I mean extraction, normalization, schema inference, creating tables in a destination, and all you have to do is write just some code to specify your source and destination. And DLT has support for many existing verified sources and destination, like SQL databases, BigQuery, Google Sheets, Snowflake. But it is a Python library, so you can also very easily write your own sources and destinations. So how would you write a basic DLT pipeline? Writing a simple DLT pipeline is actually really simple. It's a pip install solution, so all you have to do is just run, just do pip install, and then you'd be ready to start writing your pipelines in a declarative way. So what that would look like is that you would have to, import DLT, and say for example, in this use case, maybe you want to load data from say Slack. So say you want to load messages onto BigQuery. So what that would look like is that you would just import DLT. You would initiate a Slack source, specify the kind of data you want, and you would create a DLT pipeline object, and then you would just run it. So this is just like a general framework of what that would look like, and it's easy enough. But just that alone won't run your pipeline. You will have to do one or two more steps. And for example, you would have to specify your Slack API key and your BigQuery credentials. So how would you do that? We have documentation. So I would just point you to the documentation. We have a really good section on it, and it tells you how you can pass your secrets into your pipeline. If you read it, you will know how to do it. Now say you want to do something else. Maybe for example, you want to adjust the data that gets pulled from Slack. The default data that's getting pulled from Slack is maybe certain messages, but you want some other data getting pulled from Slack. So then how would you do that? Again, it's documentation. So we maintain documentations for a lot of our sources, and if you go through the documentation, then you would know how you can sort of modify the source in Python, and how you can modify it to get the kind of data you want. You see the pattern here. If you want to do more things, for example, I said you can customize sources, then you would read the documentation on that. If you want to write custom destination, there's documentation for that. Maybe you want to adjust schema contracts. Maybe you want to know how you can configure your sources for incremental loading. Well, it's all, you can comb through the documentation. So, that's one approach, obviously. You can go through the documentation, familiarize yourself with it, and just know how to do stuff. But you can also do the 2024 thing, and you can ask ChatGPT about it. Unfortunately, you won't get a really good response because GPT doesn't know enough about DLT yet. You will get some response, but it won't really be very useful. One solution to it is that each time you run, you can explain GPT, what DLT is. If you could somehow pass the entire documentation into GPT, then it would be able to answer the questions, but that's not really possible because documentations can be really large. Even if it was possible, is it really necessary? If you really want to know how to do something specific with DLT, you don't really need the whole documentation. You just need the relevant sections that will tell you, that contain that particular information, and only that needs to be fed as context. Fortunately, you can do it right now. It's using something known as RAG. RAG stands for Retrieval Augmented Generation. What it is it's a technique for exactly what I'm talking about. It's a technique whereby you can only fetch the documents that are relevant to the kind of query that you're asking, instead of feeding the whole document. And yeah, you feed that as context into GPT, and then GPT is able to answer questions about using your documentation. So how it works, I'm going to explain how we did this with how we developed a GPT bot for DLT docs. So how that could look like is, for example, we have DLT docs, which we embed using an embedding model. And we store the docs along with the vector embeddings in a vector database. So now a user will come and will ask a query, for example, how to import Google Sheets. And this query will be fed in into an LLM like GPT. Now, without the context, GPT would answer how ChatGPT would answer. So in order for GPT to be able to answer questions in a way that it has seen the documents, we would need to somehow fetch the relevant documents. And how that happens is that the same query is passed through the embedding model, and it's embedded, and then a vector search is performed on the embedded docs, and the documents associated with the highest similarity search are then retrieved, and only these documents are served as context into GPT. So then, in this way, you have GPT being able to answer questions by getting relevant context about your specific query. So I mean, that's nice. We did it. We built it. Cool thing. But then, how useful is something like this? As already seen, something like this can help your users navigate your docs. So in our case, our users can more easily navigate DLT docs without having to go through each aspect of it. But what it also helps us do is it also helps us handle a larger volume of user queries. I mean, we're an open source company, so we get like a lot of queries around different aspects of DLT. And if there's something like this, then a lot of these queries are just handled by our GPT doc helper. Another really cool thing you can do with this is that if you have this particular chat data, then you can sort of understand how exactly the users are using your tool. For example, in our case, we can understand how our users are using DLT, what are the usage patterns, maybe there's some improvement that we have to make to our documentation, and maybe some improvement to DLT. Maybe if there are a lot of questions around one particular aspect of DLT, maybe we have to make some improvement there. So in terms of the kind of query volume that is absorbed by our GPT bot, you can see that we released this last year in July, and since then it used to take in about 10 to 50 questions. Then earlier this year, it's been able to handle about 100 to 150 questions, and now it handles about 200 to 300 questions on a daily basis. So that's pretty cool, because if GPT doesn't handle it, then it means that we have to handle more questions. What we also try to do was we try to understand user behavior through these particular chats. So how we did it was we used GPT. How we did it was we took the embedded queries, and we clustered them using k-means and identified 3 clusters. And then we fed these samples of samples of questions from each cluster into GPT and asked it to generate a distinct summary. And this is what GPT found, that one theme of questions is around configuring DLT. So the GPT summary was the user questions are related to using and configuring DLT. So questions like, how can I modify the schema? How can I write DLT logs out to standard output? How can I reset state when I perform incremental loading? Another theme that it discovered was troubleshooting questions, which I would guess is kind of obvious. A lot of our users ask questions to understand, okay, I ran DLT and I got this error. Why did I get this error? What does this error mean? Here's code, help me fix this error. And a third theme of questions was just general questions about DLT. what is DLT? What is a DLT pipeline? How do I write a DLT pipeline? How can I use DLT with Dagster? If I give you the source, does it support incremental loading? So I thought it would be interesting to sort of get analysis, understanding of what kind of questions are asked in each theme. I looked at I selected the popular keywords in each theme. So what this can tell us, for example, in cluster 1, if you notice that credentials is a very common keyword. This means that when it comes to configuring DLT, a lot of people have questions around how to configure credentials, how to pass certain secrets into their pipeline. Then what's interesting is that users are also very interested in learning how they can configure their DLT pipelines to do incremental loading. Another common theme here is that around databases, keywords around BigQuery, DuckDB, Postgres. Clearly our users are very interested in configuring that. This was our biggest cluster, which is kind of understandable, which was questions around troubleshooting. And I think at the first look, it seems like a lot of our users are having trouble with using BigQuery. It could mean a couple of things. It could mean that it's just a very popular source. We tend to use BigQuery in a lot of our examples. It could also mean that our BigQuery docs need improvement, or maybe we have some issue around BigQuery. There are also other common issues around schemas, secrets, credentials, and maybe something also new was there are more issues with running DLT on Dagster and on Airflow. And another set of keywords in cluster 3. This is not so interesting because this is kind of obvious. Around general questions, users want to understand how they can use, how they can describe DLT pipelines, how they can configure their sources and resources. I think they're also interested in learning about incremental loading and about schemas with DLT. This was just a very basic analysis, but there is obviously a lot more you can do with it. For example, you can analyze common phrases, and you can do topic analysis to understand exactly what kind of questions users are having in these particular topics. And something that you can also do is you can measure the effectiveness of your GPT bot. So for example, you can look at session length and understand how effectively the bot is able to understand, to resolve queries. A longer session length means that the queries are not being resolved and the user is repeatedly asking questions. You can also do sentiment analysis. I was surprised to see a lot of people are using terms like thank you, or also abusing, which is, and GPT also responds with I'm sorry, I'm not sure, so it can sort of give you a quantitative estimation of how effective your bot is, especially around each of the specific themes. What have you learned by using a GPT doc for the past 1 year? One is that using RAGs and a really simple framework, you can really build something very effective on top of your documentation, and it can really help you handle larger volumes of support than you would have been able to without something like this. And also it also helps your user because they can more effectively navigate your docs. And what it can also do is it can give you insights into your user patterns. You can analyze the kind of messages that they've been having, and you can understand how you can possibly improve your docs, and you can improve your tools as well. Yeah, thank you.
And we have questions? Thank you for this talk. Did you use DLT for any of this?
For our bot, yeah, we use DLT. I'm pretty sure we do. We also have a bot developer here, so maybe I can ask him. I think we also use DLT to ingest our docs into the vector database when developing the GPT helper.
Okay, so let's say you update these documentation on daily basis or weekly basis, whatever. So are you running any pipeline behind it, or how are you updating your vector database with the new embeddings and the new questions?
So it's not like our documentation keeps updating on a weekly basis, so we don't really have to update our documentation repeatedly. But I think it's triggered on events. You can correct me if I'm wrong. As when users ask questions, then those questions are embedded and then they're ingested into the vector database.
Just a question. When you have a publicly available chatbot, how do you make sure it's not abused? I mean, how do you make sure that actually users only ask questions about DLT and not about other random stuff?
I mean, they can ask. It's sort of an interface to GPT, so if they want, they can ask other questions. But usually, the bot seems to be smarter in responding. This is not related to DLT.
Okay, so there's not a risk that this will just create costs for you as an open source company that are unprecedented? I mean, if you don't have any guardrails, or if you... you have to provide your own credentials?
No.
Because I'm always afraid to put any public chatbot on the internet. That's why I was asking if you have a solution on how you handle it.
Yeah, this is a valid question. I'm not really sure. I think Anton can answer this.
I put together this thing, so I can answer your question.
Cool. Yeah.
I mean, it would be really nice to have this problem, right? Because right now the costs are still too cheap. So far we have not seen any problem like this. We've been concerned with this. There is some basic rate limiting, but in order to incur significant cost, we need to have significant traffic. So, we've been through hacking use already and didn't see any effect on our costs. So maybe after this event, please go ahead and try it, and hopefully you'll have the right answer.
Yeah, I can answer your question. We did this. We built a prompt.
We have a prompt even before the user asks a question. So we embed the question in the prompt and say, don't ask any bullshit question. The question has to be relevant to what we do. So you can embed a prompt even before that. And then second prompt again, you can say, is this still a valid question? So you can do prompt engineering and figure this out. That's what I wanted to test on the website. I couldn't find that chat interface. Is it available?
Yeah. It's the documentation.
I can show you
It's
how
on the
you can
docs,
reach it.
not the website.
Please do not abuse it.
So you will find it right here in the documentation. You get GPT for help, and then you can ask questions.
Ask something not relevant.
Okay.
Let's see. Write a letter to your landlord.
All right.
In German. Oh, sorry.
Oh, there we go.
That's
So it works pretty well.
Okay, that's prompt engineering.
Yeah.
Thanks for a nice talk. And I'm actually facing a similar problem because I'm building a customer service bot based on ChatGPT for my university. And so for this, is it because you already predefine things for your chatbot? Like I see the documentation, we can predefine things in an object called, a row is called system. We can specify what kind of the personality we want this ChatGPT to be. Is it what you put in that column?
Yeah, so we do specify that you're a DLT bot helper, so probably is aware of that.
Okay, and another question. We need ChatGPT to remember what's our previous dialogue. So what I found is that if I want to achieve that, I have to record the dialogue history and restore it in an object and send back to ChatGPT API. But imagine if the dialogue getting longer and longer. So how do you overcome this problem?
I mean, so far, so we do add the history back as context, and so far it's not exceeded, so we've not really had that problem yet.
But, I mean, if you want this ChatGPT still remember the previous answer, then the data you send back to that ChatGPT API have to include all the previous message. Is it correct?
Correct, yeah.
Yeah, but so how? Like, if the object become very big, then how do you deal with like the latency problem, the response latency problem?
I mean, I would assume, I'm not sure how we do it exactly, but I would assume that you would just trim the older output and you would just keep the more recent output. Otherwise, the context window is large enough to take a certain level of history.
This is exactly what we do.
I also think with documentation, like context is not as relevant as with like a customer service bot, maybe. So I don't think we cater for the super long conversation history. So basically, we don't have an answer for you.
Yeah. But you can summarize your previous at some point. There's different heuristics that you can.
There are different heuristics you can use. Under the certain threshold, you can just summarize the rest or cut out, like we do, right? And again, proper testing is required, but so far, from what we see from our community, it's have not been yet an issue.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Looks like no other questions. Oh, sorry.
Thank you for the presentation. I have a question regarding which tools did you use for like the RAG implementation? Did you use like LangChain?
Yeah. So we used LangChain's text splitter to sort of section our documentation. We used an OpenAI model for the embedding, and we used ChromaDB as a vector database. Yeah.
Okay, I think there are. Oh, last question then.
Hi. So, yeah. So, like, let's say I'm as a user come to the dlthub, yeah, and obviously I'm not coming to read the docs. Yeah, I'm coming to solve my problem. That's why it's lovely that ChatGPT can help me to read the doc, but my task was like to solve the problem. So my question is why to train ChatGPT to make nicer docs or whatever, rather than Copilot and solve my problem and Git.
So the docs are written by a human. ChatGPT just gets docs as the context and answers the questions based on the docs. So the docs are not written by ChatGPT.
Yeah, I got it. But like so like you're making product, yeah, and when you think about the product, like user came and you're like, okay, we need your help to read the docs. But user didn't come to read the docs. User came to use DLT to solve the programming issue. And we have these LLMs. Yeah, we have ChatGPT who good with the text and Copilot who good with the code. And my idea is maybe change the product and say, let's train Copilot to write the DLT code directly, so person can copy paste, solve the issue, and live without reading docs, and docs are not needed. Maybe I don't know. So like use Copilot.
I can answer this because I'm using the ChatGPT in the DLT docs quite often, and you can ask to write code for you. Of course, you can say, okay, but this is not in my IDE, but still, I mean, better than I can copy paste and put this in my code.
Yeah,
and, of course, like every code written by ChatGPT, you have to check that if it's correct or not, but it's quite good.
Yeah, we did like a small experiment like this once though, because there's like an open source Copilot called Continue, which stores like all your basically development data, like whether you've accepted or rejected like a suggestion. And so we tried fine-tuning an LLM on these completions and whether they were accepted or not, as well as our code base, so that you can have basically a fine-tuned LLM in your IDE. I mean, we didn't really, it was more of a pet project than anything, but it's definitely something you can do, and it's probably useful if you spend some more time on it.
But can you not fine-tune OpenAI's like model just for you with your code, DLT code?
You can.
Yeah, I'm sure you can
And
do that
that
as
can
well.
solve that problem. Yeah, and that can solve that problem.
Yeah, this is cheaper.
Yeah, there's lots of
No, this is
different
again,
options.
but the product use case he's saying is a little different. It's not, he doesn't want to search the document, he wants to
The
research.
thing is, usually there are more things involved, like airflow, the orchestrators. So there's more context, and you can bridge the gap, like maybe 95%. But this 5%, you still need some additional context. So it won't be, until now, it won't be able to just do it for you verbatim, right? You need still have to back and forth. There is a credentials configuration, like Rahul already mentioned. This is the usual problem. And every one of DLT users have their own setup. They want to really configure this setup to be their own, right? That's why we still need, there's still some conversation required.
And it's not a deterministic problem, so it is not even solved by Gemini 1.5 Pro. I was using that. So even if you give that, which is like latest model, it doesn't solve all the problems in the code. So yes, being a startup, I don't think it's a solvable problem by you.
Let's have another conference in a year and compare the results.
DLT is so easy to use, so you don't need any adjustment. If you know how to compile.
Let's finish here. I mean, of course, you can continue to talk with everybody in the DLT team and not only. So, thank you, Rahul.
Thank you.